Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this live stream. My name is Savita Wilmot. I am Chief Executive of the Natural History Consortium, and it's a real honour to be here with a number of students and our Metro Mayor Dan Norris. If you can hear some fantastic noise in the background, trombones and other sounds of science, it's because we're coming to you live from We the Curious studio. And I know that all of the students here have had a really fantastic morning thinking about some of the biggest topics of our time, net zero, how we can achieve net zero, and a real emphasis over the last few days on energy, transport and waste. So Dan, over to you. It would be great to hear maybe a bit about your role, what it means to be Mayor of the West of England, and a bit about net zero, your ambitions and what's happening.
Well, first of all, thank you, Savita, and it's great to be back here at We the Curious. And to meet, I think you're from the Orchard School, is that right? Brilliant, in Bristol, so really good to see you, and thank you for coming today. Look, my name is Dan Norris, for those who don't know online, who are watching. I'm Mayor of the West of England, recently elected back in May. And one of the things that has been really important to me is to make sure that we really recognise that there's a climate emergency and we've got to do something about it. And one of the things that has been quite interesting for me was some years ago, 10 or so years ago, I used to be in the government and I was an environment minister. And one of the things that the officials, the civil servants, told me as an environment minister was that in the history of the planet, for all time, Britain, these small islands, had produced the second highest amount of CO2 of any nation anywhere in the world, only behind America, would you believe? And I remember thinking, well, that sounds pretty urgent to me, Savita. Back years or so, incredibly proud of the West of England because all of our local authorities, plus my combined authority, have made a commitment to net zero by 2030. That's not very long away. It's only 9 years away. And it means that year on year, we have to reduce our CO2 emissions by 10%, and that's a very tough thing to do. But I have a real belief, a strong belief, that the people in the West of England in particular, above all else in the country, are way ahead of the politicians when it comes to the environment and dealing with the climate emergency. And that excites me because I believe that you and people of your generation in particular are going to be the people who force the politicians to make the decisions that are needed to really hit that CO2 target. We want net zero by 2030 in our region, and ideally across the rest of the country, either then or soon after. And we're hoping that COP is just 3 weeks away, less than 3 weeks away, so I'm hoping we're going to hear some very exciting things from that, that will allow where all these politicians from around the world are meeting so they can make some really key decisions to make sure that the planet doesn't get into real problems, and that we have animals and plants as well, because it's not just about the climate, it's also about biodiversity. And that's really important to me too. I think that's about more than 2 minutes, so I'm going to stop and get these really good questions.
Okay, fantastic. Well, I think you've led into these first two questions. I'm going to put two together. We've got one from Mia. Can you raise your hand, Mia? And one from Melissa as well. And I think that me and Melissa kind of hit the nail on the head here, Dan. So the questions are, do you think this 2030 deadline is achievable? And what will happen if we don't make the deadline? It's not accomplished. And the second question is, what is your opinion about how long it will take to reach, for climate change to reach a sustainable level?
Right, okay. Mia? Right, Mia, I hope I answered your questions properly. So, is it achievable? Yes, but it will be hard. What will happen if we don't achieve it? I'm not going to even think about that because it's so important that we do it. So I want it not just to be me, I want it to be the other politicians in my area, but most importantly the public, and particularly younger people, because I think you've got most to gain, haven't you, if we get this right? I've lived in this world a little while now, and it's been my generation and earlier generations that have caused a lot of this problem, because we didn't listen. And I remember when I was a little bit younger than you actually, back in the 70s I think it was, 1970s that is, not 1870s in case you were wondering. And I remember watching a BBC programme called Tomorrow Has Been Cancelled, and it talked about the environment and that all the CO2 emissions and all the problems it would cause. And I remember being so worried about it that I couldn't sleep that night. It was sort of scared me quite a lot. And of course the next day all the grown-ups were carrying on like nothing had been said and happened. But it was right. It was absolutely right. So we can't think about not succeeding. We've got to think about doing what we can. and our region could lead the country, I believe, because I think we are greener than anywhere else, and I think it's a great opportunity, because not only does it mean we can do our bit for the planet, but we can create lots of excellent tech that will help solve the problem that we can export and earn money from by sending it abroad and as well. So there's lots of advantages to us in many ways. And then the other question was, when will the world's sustainable target be hit?
How long is it going to take to go?
So who asked that, sorry? Melissa. Thank you for your question, Melissa. Well, I don't know is the answer, but we've got to get on with it. What I think Britain can do is, because of our history and because of our language, because English is the greatest language to have, because most parts of the world will have learnt it and therefore understand our message. But I think we've got a great opportunity as a country, provided we are net zero as a country first, to be able to persuade China or India or the Brazils or the other countries that are now having their industrial revolution, hundreds of years after we started having ours, we could persuade them to do things in a better way, because we now know, obviously, that CO2 is a big problem. When we had our industrial revolution, no one knew about any of that. It just thought it was great to be able to have steam trains and engines and all the rest of it, powered by coal. But we now know different. But we will not be listened to by China or these other countries in the world who are producing huge amounts of emissions. China, I think, produces, I might be wrong, but I think it's 24%. No doubt one of you will check and tell me if I've got it quite wrong, global emissions. We currently, I think, produce 1% of global emissions, the UK. But what we need to be is at zero, because then we can say, with total moral certainty and credibility, we can say to these other countries, we've put our house in order, and we want you to do that, and we'll help you to do that if we possibly can, with our clever scientists and our innovative people. And our region is brilliant. I've just come from British Aerospace today, or Airbus actually, and they're doing amazing things with technology to make planes lighter and stronger, to use hydrogen fuels hopefully fairly soon. I mean, it won't be very, very quick, but they're working really hard, and hopefully we'll get a breakthrough, so that we don't use aviation fuel, and we use hydrogen instead, and the only byproduct of that is water, so that's good. And there's lots of other things, like we've got great inventors in our country and in our region that can do amazing things. So I'm quite positive about it, and I want your positivity, because I believe you as young people are really positive about it, and I think you really get it. I just don't think the grown-ups like me do. So it's your job as well. It's not just my job. It's your job to keep talking to your parents or carers, and to write to the politicians, and to anyone you see, and get them on side, because actually young people over the last 20 years have made a big difference. I wouldn't be saying what I was saying if young people like you hadn't been doing such a good job. I've had to learn from you, so keep it up.
Well, following on from your visit today, we've had a great question about the role of industry from Taya. So Taya asked what plans there are to get in touch with heads of companies, industry, to communicate this on a global scale.
Well, to be honest, Ed, that is really to do with national government more than being the mayor, Metro Mayor of Western England. But I will be saying that when I get to see the Prime Minister, and he's promised to meet me, so I'm looking forward to doing that. I hope that's sooner rather than later. And that's exactly the sort of thing I'll be saying. What is it you're doing as the British government to make sure that everybody's joined up, so that we're all doing the things we need to do in our country, and we're also talking to the other parts of the world that we want to do things in a certain way too, so we can get an agreement, because we won't get the net zero that we seek, not just in our region and our country, but also globally, unless we work together. That's the only way it will happen. And it will mean that the rich countries like Britain will have to pay quite a lot of money to help the developing world to be able to meet their targets as well, because they have particular challenges that are even tougher than ours. And we can't just stand back having made lots of money out of our industrial revolution. We must now give some of that money back that we've earned over the many hundreds of years, to make sure that we've got a planet. And it's pretty fundamental, isn't it? I don't know about you, but when I hear that the sort of icebergs are melting up in the North Pole, and that there may not even be polar bears, it sort of worries me. I kind of think that is just such an awful thing. I can't begin to tell you, explain how I actually feel about it, other than it makes me want to do something urgently about it. And I think you feel the same. Do you think it's stick your hand up if you think it's an urgent thing? Yeah, I thought exactly that. It is urgent, and you're absolutely right. But many grown-ups still don't get that. And that's why, for example, I said I didn't want Bristol Airport to expand, because although I want people to be able to fly, we have to do sensible things as well that don't make the planet in a worse place. So we have to get that balance right. And it is tough, and you've got to persuade people, but I'm confident we can achieve it. But particularly if you keep telling everybody there's an emergency, what are you doing about it? And write and talk to people. That's what we need to do, work together.
So I know that one of the things students have been looking at today is about waste. So, you know, keen to look at this as a particular topic. We've had two great questions about waste and plastics in from Callum and from Jake. Callum and Jake are here. So Callum is asking, why is it we allow so much waste to enter our oceans and waterways? What can we do to prevent it? And Jake is asking, how come we don't deal with our plastic here? We have better technology than the countries that we ship it to.
Yeah. Well, excuse me, Callum, I think it's a really good question, and I've often asked that myself. As I've gone and bought some things in the supermarket, and I bought what looks like, I don't know, a cake or something, and it's in a box, and you take out a huge bit of plastic, and you're thinking, what on earth's going on? And it's all about trying to sell you things, rather than thinking about the planet. Now, how do we change that? That's a tough one. And I think the only way you can do it in some ways is by legislating, by changing the law, by saying that it's not permissible to do certain things any longer. Even if it is for companies who want to make money, they've got to accept that those days have gone. What we need to do is change. And in terms of what we is by taking a strong lead, and I hope that I'm taking a strong lead here in the west of England about those kind of things. And I will keep asking questions and keep doing what I possibly can. But I also think it's about national government too, because there are some of these things that are just too big. That, you know, I'll encourage all the businesses that I talk to in our region, because I have responsibility for business and investment and bringing jobs and skills to our area. But what I'll want to do is say to all the businesses that I see, well, what are you doing in the meantime? Before the government changes the law, whenever that happens to be, hopefully sooner rather than later, what are you doing individually? And there's some good examples. Many companies are very good and do make a strong ethical stance. You know, and as I said, there was an Airbus today, and they no longer have plastic cups, for example. Companies can do it, but it needs legislation, because you can ask people to do the right thing, and many good people will do that. But there's some people just in their habits, and as you get older, you won't know this yet. But as you get older, you get sort of stuck in your ways. So you need a bit of a helping hand to change your behaviour, to be honest.
Now, I know we've got a question here in the audience, so could you tell us your name?
Was there any other young man
and,
ask a question?
It was Jake and Callum. I
Sorry.
think you answered them both.
Oh, right, okay,
yeah.
did it? Okay, sorry.
Could you tell us your name and read your question?
My name is DJ. Why hasn't the climate action plan been on the news yet? Because the nation doesn't know we need to reduce 65% of waste by 2030, which is in 9 years, as she said earlier.
Yeah.
How can we sort out a problem without knowing what the problem is? It's the same thing as my teacher giving me a homework and a deadline and not telling me what the homework is. So it's like the nation doesn't know what they're meant to do.
If you're saying we could do more,
Yeah.
by holding our hands up, all of us, all politicians, we all need to do more. And in fairness, I think that many of them do realise that and are wanting to do it. But it's always a balance between what's currently happening and what you want to do in the future, and that's about persuasion. So the airport is a good example of where I had difficult discussions with some of my colleagues, because I said I didn't want the airport to expand, and they said, well, what about jobs at the airport, or what about the business people that travel in and out of the airport? And so you have to make some tough decisions. So I think that has helped people discuss that, because I think most people across the west of England, whether that be in Bristol, where your school is, or South Gloucestershire, or Bath and North East Somerset, or North Somerset indeed, I think people have talked a lot about the airport and whether it should expand, and part of that has been about the environment, because that's a huge component of it. But what do you think? Let me ask you what you think I could do, because I've been in the job for 6 months, and I've got tons to learn, and lots of people asking me things. What's your particular idea?
I think the nation needs to be like educated more.
Okay.
So it should be on the news. Like, it was like how like 2 years ago, like COVID started, and then we first heard about it, and it was just like, oh, poor China, and then later on until it started actually proper affecting us, and then we all started saying, oh, now we have to do something. So it's the same thing with climate change. Like, no one's talking about it on the news. I will not go home today, and then I will watch a bit of like COVID, and then that's it. We just have to come about something else. So climate change should also be there by COVID-19,
Yeah.
because it's basically as bad as each other. Eventually we'll get to that stage if we don't do anything about it.
Yeah. Well, there's a great journalist here called Paul Boltrop who works for the BBC. He's here now, so he's listening to this, and I'm hoping that he might come up with an idea and persuade some of his colleagues that maybe we could have a debate involving young people and local politicians, so we talk about this, so that it does become higher on the news agenda. Because it's not just my decision, I can talk about all sorts of things, and in fairness, Paul's here today because he thinks it's important, obviously, and wants to report that, so that's partly happening. But if you're saying we need to do more, I agree. We do need to have more discussions, and I'd like to see people, because you've actually got more invested in the future. You know, I've got, maybe 20 years or whatever left, but you've got a lot longer than that. So the decisions that I'm hopefully going to be making with others and with all of the public are hopefully going to benefit you in the future, because, you'll remember that. I remember that old politician I saw in Bristol in 2021, and he managed to do something to make a difference along with the others and along with everybody else, and that was good, and we all can be proud of that. And that's what we want to feel, don't we, in the future, that we look back and say we made the right calls, we made the right decisions, and that does need education, I agree.
We had a similar question from Grace, who was asking about the role of education, but I wanted to link it to a question from Eloise. I said your name right, Eloise, who's gone kind of the next step from education to say, well, how can we help the public to change habits and behaviours as well? Kind of that next step from education.
Well, I tell you what's really important is, I think one of the biggest behaviours we need to change, Eloise, is how we use transport. We use far too many cars, and that's something we've done in our region for a long time. I think we've had the highest car use of anywhere in the UK, partly because we've got rural areas outside and that's the only way you could get around, and we haven't had a high quality public transport system across the whole of the West of England region, and we need that desperately. Now, I've been able to help secure over £500 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but we need an awful lot more than that, just so that you know. But I've been able to secure that over the next 5 years, and what I'm going to be doing is putting emphasis on buses, because that's the short-term gain that we can get. Because 40% of the CO2 emissions are caused by public transport, or transport rather, in general. And if we can get people to change their behaviour in the way that you obviously want, so that they use buses more, and and they walk and they cycle and they wheel if they have a disability or whatever it is, if they can do more active things and get out of cars, and if they must make car journeys, then they use electric cars, I think we'd go a long way to solving the problem and reaching our very ambitious 2030 target. But what I'd like to see is sort of bus shelters that are really nice, that you could charge your phone up in even, or have good quality information that are well protected from the weather, so you can use them all the year round and not feel that you're going to get soaked if you go and catch a bus. I want the buses to be reliable and comfortable, and I want them to have their own, it's an awful phrase, but sort of dedicated lane. What it means is you have bus lanes, basically, so that only the bus users, because there's no point me getting lots of new buses if they're stuck in with all the cars and can't move around. What they need is a special lane so that they can whiz along and go way past the cars, and then hopefully people stuck in the traffic in the cars can see, oh, the bus is the way to go because that's moving fast and I'm stuck in a traffic jam. So that's what I want. So it's making it easy as possible for people to do the right thing so that they can change their behaviour. Because I actually think most people want to make the changes. It's just hard, so they need help to do something that's right. If we can make it easy, and that's my plan, to make it as easy as possible for people to do the right thing, then I think we've got a really good chance of hitting that net zero target.
Excuse me.
You're doing well, the parents on.
Did anyone else want to ask a question? Sorry.
For the drivers who are getting new cars, would you say there is enough electric car charging points for a car, and how would you change that?
Right. There isn't enough car charging points. We're way behind what we need to be doing in that area. That's something I'm quite concerned about. I'm having discussions now with some big companies that want more car charging points, because I'm waiting for the government to give me loads of money to do that, but it hasn't come yet, and so I'm anxious to get on with it as best I can. But you're absolutely right, we need to do that as fast as possible. I still want people to use buses and trains and other forms of transport, and walk and cycle and all the rest of it, in preference to using cars. But where they must use a car, I'd rather they used an electric vehicle. So it's about how we get that huge change in behaviour to happen. And the pandemic hasn't got many good things to say about it, but one of the things it's kind of taught us is that many of us can work and communicate from home on things like Zoom and the other platforms. And maybe that's part of the solution as well. Maybe we don't need to commute so much to go into work. Maybe there are some days we could work from home, some of us, and that would help in the short term while we're getting the public transport system up to scratch. Because I think it'd be great to have a really good public transport system. When I was your age, it wasn't there. It's got a lot better, and all credit to the local politicians who made that happen with working with the people. But it needs to be so much better. It needs a step change, a big change. So I'm hoping that we'll use this £500 million wisely and effectively and efficiently to make a real difference in the next 5 years. And because we're going to be doing a good job, I hope we'll get a lot more money to do even more wonderful things, because we really need it. And it needs to be affordable. I want you all to be able to think, I can go and use a bus or any form of public transport because I know I can afford it. And you know that if you go there, you won't be waiting long at a railway station or a bus stop before the bus or train comes. So that's my challenge, to try and get them frequently enough so that you think, yeah, I'll definitely go because I won't be waiting very long. And it'll be affordable, so I haven't got to, save up loads out of my pocket money to be able to go and see somebody or go to the shops or meet my friends. Do you want to say that? Ask another question?
Yeah.
What can I ask, then you're stuck with, of course, what makes you different? What's going to make us think, okay, because we can sit here and talk, but what's going to make you different from the other politicians who sit there and talk about this?
Well, I think what makes me different, but it's for others to decide that, is that I'm prepared to say that my party needs to change as well. So my Labour Party needs to make changes. I think it's all very well me saying you've got to change and they've got to change and the other have got to change, but my party has to change. And the other political parties, in my view, don't say that. They kind of act like they're perfect and everyone else has got to make the change. And I actually think that if you really understand the challenge of the environment, you've got to recognise that everyone's got to make a change. And it isn't just one change, it's always changing, constantly keeping ahead of what's needed in order to get to this target, because it's a really tough target. Dealing with the planet and the climate emergency is not easy. It is very hard because of the bad things that have happened. So I hope that makes me different in a way that you think is important, because I'm not saying you do it all, I'm saying I and my party have also got to change in order to meet this target and make sure that our planet is in good shape in the future.
We're just about out of time, and I've seen that we have 2 quick questions. So should we have both of you quickly ask your question, and then somehow Dan's going to wrap it all up in a very quick answer. Go ahead.
There's all these really good environmental products, but the problem is they seem to be a lot more expensive. People who are vegan tend to have to pay a lot more for cake or chocolate or other alternatives than normal person has with dairy.
Yeah. The trouble is that's because not enough people are eating those products. They will get cheaper, but it would be lovely if I had money to subsidise them and make them a bit cheaper. That would be great. So if I get some spare money and I'm allowed to do it, I will make vegan cakes cheaper, okay? I will make that a priority. But I've got to get the agreement of the government for that. So, but if I could do it, I would do it. That sounds like a good plan.
Heard it here first. All right, last question.
How do you think we can get the older generation to help us? Because obviously, it's a very big issue with us young people, and we seem to care about it a lot, whereas the older generation seem to not be doing as much to help us.
I think what you need to do is talk to people, older people, because older people tend to be the ones who've got the money and the power, because that's how it works, isn't it? So your job is really quite important, because the decisions that we need to be made in order to deal with the climate emergency will have to be made by older people with the power and with the money. And they will listen to you because you will be their grandchildren or their children. So you have to work on them and work on them consistently and every day and keep at it. Don't be cross with them. Just say how brilliant it is that certain things are happening and could we do more? And I think you'll find that they probably will be very responsive. Because I get a sense, actually, as each decade passes, that older people and people with power and money and the capacity to make the change are coming to understand it. They are getting there. But do you know what? They listen to your generation more than anybody because they love you, basically, because you're their family, aren't you? So do your job. That's your job. And then when you've got money and power in the future, don't forget that you've got to listen to the younger generation then, so that they can tell you what's needed.
Brilliant. Thank you for finalising. I'm going to give Dan kind of 30 seconds for any last remarks. We've got schools watching us from across the west of England on the live stream. We've had some amazing questions from all of you, really put Dan in the hot seat here. So a big thank you to everyone who's written a question, asked a question, put your hand up, and taken part today. And I know that lots of people on the live stream are putting in your questions as well. Even if we didn't get those to Dan right now, we will be capturing all those questions. So if you're still thinking of things, do put them in the live stream. Dan, final thoughts over to you, and maybe a challenge to this group as well.
Well, look, I think really it's just been great that you've done this and had this event. I think it's amazing that people, young people particularly, are watching in on the live stream. It's great that you're here. It's lovely for me to meet some younger people, because I tend to meet people the same age as me or older. So it's really, really, really nice. But you have got a serious job. Don't think because you're young, your job is not a serious one. It is really serious, really important. You can shape the future by making sure that you get that message that you believe in across to those people who are going to be making decisions, as I said before. So, you know, it's down to you too. We're all in this together. It's all our planet, not just some of us is, it's all of us is. And so we've got to do it, okay? So you do your bit and I'll try and do my bit. And if you see me when you're out and about, knock me on the shoulder and ask me how I'm getting on. Am I getting on with the things that you think are important? Because I need you to keep reminding me to do it as well. Because although I feel strongly about it, there's lots of other things that I'm being told and that I need to do as well, and I want you to keep reminding me how important the planet and the environment is, okay? Great to see you. Thank you very much for your questions.
So fantastic. Fantastic.